Former Department of Homeland Security Advisor and former Secret Service agent Charles Marino is a recognised security expert.
I think the Biden administration has both a strategy problem and a PR problem in terms of messaging that I alluded to earlier. The perception globally, which if you let hang out there long enough becomes the reality, the perception is that globally, migrants believe that the border is wide open and that the immigration and border laws are not going to be enforced. And for the most part, they have been correct. The other thing is that the Biden administration has never shown the American public what their border strategy actually is. And what we see as a result is we see the Border Patrol, instead of being used for enforcement operations, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, instead of being used for enforcement programs, we see that these two agencies are being used to aid instead the process of migrants making their way into the U.S. So basically, our southwest border has become a huge national security threat here in the U.S. because it's become nothing more than an 1,800-mile processing center.
On the note of, the notion that there is an open border, how does it compare to the Trump administration? Is the Biden administration just not tough enough on immigration?
Well, they haven't been in terms of the Biden administration providing any deterrence to migrants wanting to make this trip. Nor have they worked against the cartels in a meaningful way. I mean, we see that based on the numbers of migrants approaching 6 million. We see that in terms of the fentanyl becoming the leading cause of death between 18 and 45-year-olds. We see it in the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, and we see it in the power that the cartels have attained under this administration. Back to the former Trump administration, again, you saw the asylum laws and system of the United States be enforced. You saw verification of claims for asylum, and you saw a policy and a process by making them wait for their asylum claims to be approved before they were allowed into the United States. Here, under the Biden administration, somebody shows up to the border and claims asylum. They let them into the United States, where they await their immigration hearings for the 5 to 7 years to come. And what happens, Maddie, is these migrants eventually just don't reappear for their immigration hearings, and they disappear within the interior of the United States.
Critics say that when he took office, President Biden, setting the policy, you enforcing the policy, sent a clear message to prospective migrants. He ended enrollments in the program that asylum seekers had to remain in Mexico. He wanted to stop using Title 42 public health protections to expel migrants, and he halted construction of the border wall. Here is the chief patrol agent, your employee, for the Tucson sector. Take a look.
In the Tucson sector, interviewing people post-arrest, what became the most common response was that they believed that when the administration changed, that the law changed and policy changed, and that there was an open border.
Migrants believe there's an open border.
Chris, have you heard some of our political leaders speak about the border and communicate that the border is open? I don't think the more than 1.5 million people who have been removed or expelled from the border would consider the border open, but political leaders communicate that the border is open. That is music to the smugglers' ears, and the smugglers themselves
So wait. You're going to blame this all on Republican critics?
Absolutely not. Absolutely
I mean, you're not
not
going to say that the administration and the policies on Remain in Mexico or Title 42 or stopping construction of the wall, that had no impact?
Chris, that's not what I said. I'm just citing for you a few things, and please allow me. Number one, they use that rhetoric. Number two, we're dealing with smuggling organizations that are far more sophisticated than they were when I prosecuted them for 12 years as an assistant United States attorney and as the United States attorney. They spread disinformation, they spread misinformation, and the like.
What do you think will happen when Title 42 ends, if it does end in May? Because Greg Abbott was saying that the number could increase by about 18,000 a day, which would be about 6 million a year, which is obviously a lot more than the 2.3 million they saw in 2022. Do you think that this is just going to get absolutely out of control?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, again, that we went last year, is because there were some signs that Title 42 might end up going by the wayside, depending on what was making its way through the courts and what the Biden administration was going to do. And when you talk to migrants, some of them, not all of them, but some of them actually were mentioning by name Title 42. And that's another thing the media gets wrong. I mean, these are very smart people, savvy people who have made these trips, and they have a lot of agency. They're educated, they know what they're talking about. And so just that fact alone, that they will mention Joe Biden by name, Title 42 by name in so many cases, tells you how much worse that this could get. Now, I think the sort of silver lining is that Joe Biden's trip to El Paso, to Mexico, signifies or shows us that he's probably worried on a political level about what such a massive influx post Title 42, what that would look like, what that might do to his presidency, because those record numbers, as you said, were an issue in the midterms. The Democrats have not had a good answer to them. And so if he understands that, then maybe some of these policies he puts out will start to get more stringent. He has been slowly, gradually, incrementally adding policies to his sort of roster of approaches to the immigration system. And if he is starting to fill some of those holes, then it's possible that when Title 42 goes away, he's forced to come up with more serious policies, and that's a big help. I'm not super optimistic that's the case, but there are some good signs. There are some signs in the right direction that he understands just on a purely political level that this could be a disaster.
And Title 42, as you know, has been challenged by this administration from the start, similar to Remain in Mexico. Title 42 has never been fully welcomed and grasped by the administration. And as a result, that has aided in the surge in migrants coming to the U.S. But once Title 42 goes away, there will be absolutely zero enforcement on the border. Title 42, even if used at 50% of the time, at least has served as some type of deterrent on the border. But once it goes away, there will be nothing. The Biden administration announced earlier today that they're going to start enforcing asylum claims, which essentially is reverting back to the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico, just not calling it that. However, I think it's very unlikely that they'll actually enforce anything. I think these will be words put on a piece of paper in the form of policy, and I think it represents just how much trouble the president and the administration realize he's in should he choose to run for re-election, and the damage he's done to the Democratic Party on law and order in general in the United States.